Hello, I'm Dazzling One, and this week's topic is going to be a fun one because I am on the fence. I'm not a flat earther, but I would not fully deny those who believe in a flat earth. I do think there is overwhelming amount of evidence if you truly look into this topic and put aside your preconceived notions that there could be a flat earth, but I'm not going to sell myself on the entire ideal either because I don't know yet. But before I even get into it, I'm a dates person. I just want to say this because it's kind of a message to you guys. But 3 years ago, on this day, May 27th, I graduated from high school, 2012. And I never thought in a million years that I would be producing videos on YouTube, nonetheless talking about flat earth. I probably would have thought, what in the world, in my 17-year-old mind. But now, 3 years later, it's just interesting to see where I've come. So, just to anyone out there, you never know what you're going to be doing in another 3 years, another year, or another 6 months. Life can change very quickly. For those of you who haven't graduated high school yet, take that into account. But anyways, getting into the topic and enough about myself, flat earth. So, it's garnered a lot of popularity on the internet. People are talking about it. I see a lot of people promoting the ideal and so forth, or they're ardently against it. And like always, I want to know why this is such a big deal. Why is it so important? Does it change the world if I think it's flat? Or does it improve my life? Or does it take away from it? Well, if it is indeed a conspiracy of some sort and I'm being lied to, and the 500 years of history that I thought was set in stone is wrong, then it is interesting. And most would say once you question the earth being flat, you're pretty much a nut job and you lost some brain cells. But this is an exploration into the history, looking at different cultures, looking at different theories and ideals, and how it came about that the earth was round or spherical. So, with that in mind, in the days of antiquity, most would say that the earth was flat. Although, I disagree with most that would say that before Columbus set sail, which Columbus was not the first guy to make it to the Americas, there's been records of other people who've made it before him. There were people who believed that the earth was indeed globular prior to his arrival, or even to Magellan. But one of the common theories of the ancient world is that they believed in a quote-unquote sky dome. And so most equate this sky dome, they go straight to the Bible. And this has made the Bible a butt of bad jokes for many skeptics, because they'll say the Bible is so ignorant it believes the world is flat. While others will defend the Bible and say, no, the Bible does not say the world is flat, it's metaphoric. And I'll get into that a little later. But the Bible does talk about something called the firmament, which many believe is a solid dome which separates the waters from the waters. In Genesis 1:6 it says, "And God said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Now the Hebrew word translated in Latin Vulgate as firmamentum is rakia, whose verb form means to spread, stamp, or beat out. The material beaten out is not directly specified, but both biblical and extra-biblical evidence suggests that it is metal. A verb form of rakia is used in both of these passages, and gold leaf was hammered out, and I take this from Exodus 39:3. So, another place in the Bible that they will say that you could assert when you're looking at the firmament, which I'll get into what the firmament is to flat earthers, Amos 9:6. "It is he that buildeth his stories in the heaven, and hath founded his troops in the earth. He that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. The Lord is his name." And the vault of the earth, some will say, is the sky dome or the firmament. Now, it's not just Christianity or Judaism that had this ideal, potentially, that the earth is flat. There were many cultures around the world that believed in a flat earth, including Babylonians, who believed the earth was also hollow to provide room for the subterranean civilization. And I did a series about ancient civilizations and how they influence us today, and Agartha was in there, and I did a past video mentioning hollow earth. But hollow earth does overlap with this theory a little bit, just because when we get into later Admiral Byrd and stuff, we're going to be mentioning him, and many credit him with the discovery of hollow earth. Others say it's wish-wash. But anyways, there was ancient China, who also believed in a flat earth for a time. The ancient Egyptians, who believed the earth was square with 4 corners. And they believed that the sky was a roof supported by pillars. The Sumerians believed there was tin that was the metal of heaven. And Homer believed the sky is a metal hemisphere covering a round, flat disc like earth surrounded by water. Homer, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, he spoke alternately of a bronze or iron sky vault. And for the scripture in Genesis 1:17, it says, "And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And some say when he says them, he's talking about the stars. Then, if you get into Celtic mythology, then you'll see that the Father God's skull is the dome of heaven, which echoes the Aryan ideal that the sky evolved from the head of the cosmic man, Purusha, and therein dwell the earliest Vedic gods. And then, of course, if you think about Chicken Little and the fear of the sky falling, some say it originates from the ancient cosmology. When Alexander asked the Celtic leader what they feared most, they answered that they were afraid that the sky would fall on their heads. In Manichaean myths, the sky was made from the skins of defeated demons, echoing themes from the Babylonian Enuma Elish. In Zoroastrianism, one finds a spherical earth, but one was still enclosed in a celestial shell of first stone, then shiny metal. In the Finnish Kalevala, the sky is made of the finest steel. And the ancient Tibetans not only had a spherical earth surrounded by an iron heaven, but also knew, amazingly enough, that the earth's diameter was about 7,000 miles. So, if you take a look at the 6 big major religions, and you can debate, not everyone within these believe that the earth is flat, because there are many people I know, at least in Christianity, who would be very upset if you associated them as a flat earther. But some will point to the fact that in these religions that there are claims within their religious texts that could point to a potential flat earth. Now, if you don't know what the 6 major religions are, really quick, I'll just tell you and give you the statistics on them. So Christianity comprises the #1 spot, and it has 2.1 billion people in it who claim Christianity, followed by Islam with 1.3 billion, followed by Hinduism with 900 million, followed by Buddhism with 376 million, followed by Sikhism with 23 million, and last but not least comes Judaism, followed with 14 million. So that's another interesting thing. But we've looked at scriptures from the Bible thus far, and there's plenty more to come that could hint at a flat earth, but also I'll show you later some scriptures that some will say hints at a spherical earth. Now, in Islam, people point to, in the Quran, 71:19, and Allah has made the earth for you as a carpet. And so some will say because they're describing the earth as a carpet, that means that they believe that it was flat. Others will point to the Quran 78:6, which says, "Have we not made the earth as a wide expanse?" And so, once again, what does it mean by a wide expanse? Are we talking about a flat earth? And then, of course, in the Quran, there's 15:19, it says, "And the earth we have spread out, set thereon mountains firm and immovable, and produce therein all kinds of things in due balance." So, once again, it does seem that they're hinting that the earth is spread out and not spherical. However, like I said, not everybody who is a member of Islam would think that the earth is flat. Just a disclaimer there for anyone in a religion that's like, no, I am not a flat earther. And then some will point to in Hinduism that in the Rig Veda that it has a few passages like this one that says, "The ends of the earth are beheld laid waste." And again, "He who hath measured with his ray the boundaries of heaven and earth." So when they say boundaries or ends, people automatically think it ends somewhere rather than being a round ball. And they will say, well, right there, it points to a flat Earth. So, when did a majority of people shift from flat to spherical? Now, some will say, oh, it happened right after Columbus's expedition in 1492, because everybody thought he was going to fall off the Earth and then discover the Americas. Or maybe it was after Ferdinand Magellan successfully traveled around the Earth between the years of 1519 and 1521, and people are like, well, he made it around the Earth without falling off, so clearly it's not flat. But in all honesty, if you look back at history, then you'll find that the history of a round Earth where people got this perspective could go way back BC, all the way to the Greeks and Pythagoras. And a lot of his ideals gained popularity during the Hellenistic era, and hence the heliocentric globe. But even Plato, in the years 427 to 347 BC, was convinced that the Earth was spherical. He even stated, my conviction is that the Earth is a round body in the center of the heavens. Also, I believe the Earth is very vast. Not to mention that before even Nicholas Copernicus came about, there was the heliocentric model of the solar system, which was the belief that all planetary bodies revolved around the sun rather than revolving around the Earth like the geocentric model believed. And then in the 16th century, it was made famous by Nicholas Copernicus, who also proposed that the Earth was the third planet from the sun. And he also proposed the sun doesn't orbit the Earth, but the Earth spins instead of being stationary, as once believed. That is why it appears as though stars move and the sun rises and sets. And, right, of course, he went through persecution by the Catholic Church, but then later it easily fell into favor. But even before, in 276 BC, Eratosthenes was probably the first to accurately measure the size of the Earth. So there's a little back history on, and of course there's Galileo as well. So the reason people are skeptical of believing that the Earth is globular, and some would say that maybe they're like quick to throw out their beliefs of 500 years, and I was really like, when I heard of this, I was like, no way, the Earth is not flat. Because I was so caught up in thinking about basic science. Any astronomy or earth science class will clearly tell you that you live on a round Earth, the planets are round, so we could travel to outer space, and so forth. And of course, I was skeptical, and I kind of wanted to go against it, but as you go try to disprove something, sometimes you realize there's certain things that don't add up. So one of the big arguments that people make is that there's no real pictures of the Earth's globe, and there's only one picture that they show, and it's always the same one all of the time. And there's also a 3D model they have of the Earth spinning for 25 hours on end, and the clouds are not moving in the spinning model. Now, if you lay on your back and you're just looking up at clouds, observing the shapes, hanging out with a friend or by yourself, you'll notice that the clouds are moving. So why aren't they moving in this model? Now, a man by the name of Matthew Boylan, he's a former NASA operational graphic manager who now does a lot of comedic work. He worked for years creating photorealistic computer graphics for NASA. He's now a vocal flat earther. Boylan claims that NASA's sole reason for existence is to propagandize the public and promote this false ball Earth heliocentric worldview. Originally recruited because of his skills and reputation as a hyper-realist multimedia artist, he started doing projects like photoshopping various lighting and atmospheric effects onto images of Earth, the Moon, Jupiter, Europa, etc. So, as you can see, he's claiming that a lot of what we see NASA producing, saying, oh look, a picture of this, a picture of that, it's really just some artist somewhere putting out a picture that we're believed to look realistic, and then it goes in every single science textbook, every single poster. And that would mean that like my profile picture for my channel of Mars and then Earth from afar would not be real, and that it's made up, which would be really, really Really sad, but maybe that is the case. Many too are skeptical of NASA because of its questionable origins, and many will say, who believe in the flat Earth conspiracy, that NASA faked the moon landings and that it actually took place in Burbank, California. Now, there was an interesting article published in 2009 by Reuters that talked about how NASA admitted that they erased the original moon landing footage, which I'm like, that is pretty fishy. If you look at a lot of the pictures of a lot of the astronauts that have claimed to have gone to outer space in the Apollo missions or been the moon landing and so forth, you'll notice that they have Freemason ties or making certain gestures that seem very, I guess, what some people would think of as linked to the Illuminati or Satanism or so forth. Then, of course, there's this dark history where after World War II, a lot of Nazi scientists were led into this country under Operation Paperclip and also worked in different sects of our government, but one of them was NASA. And then there's this guy by the name of Jack Parsons, who was a rocket engineer. And he was one of the founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and a black magician who performed a ritual at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory with Aleister Crowley. They also say that he prayed to Pan before every launch, which wouldn't really surprise me. And he was also close friends with Ron L. Hubbard, who was the founder of Scientology, which right there, you know about the dark history or even the claims a lot of celebrities have made about the wackiness of Scientology. Right there, that should be a red flag. And of course, birds of a feather flock together, so having Aleister Crowley as a friend and Ron L. Hubbard to me seems a little bit, I don't know, shady. And he was also rumored to have held orgies at mansions in Pasadena, California. So he sounds like a pretty upstanding guy. Just kidding if you get my sarcasm. Then, of course, you know, there's Werner von Braun, who was a former, well, he's a Nazi scientist, so. But as you can see, they infiltrated our government into NASA. They made a lot of breakthroughs, and some people will point to the conspiracy theories that surround Hitler, World War II, what the Nazis were truly after, all the esoteric things found in it, the fallen angel alien connection, and all of that. I've done videos in the past about it, plenty of videos on the internet about it, so if you're interested in that stuff, look it up, but it does seem like it could easily tie into this flat Earth conspiracy. Now, many will point to Admiral Byrd, and I remember mentioning him at the beginning of this video because many link him to the hollow Earth theories, but he's also linked to flat Earth theories. Now, he had an exploration between the years of 1928 and 1953. He explored the North Pole and Antarctica, which was huge because they were like in no man's land. In 1947, there was Operation Highjump, and Byrd discovered a landmass larger than the USA, rich in minerals with mountains of coal and many resources, and that many nations wanted to claim their stake there. Then nothing further was done. So, that's interesting. In 1947, Byrd took 4,700 troops, an aircraft carrier, 13 ships and planes there, in Operation Highjump, planning a scientific exploration of 8 months, for return defeated in 6 weeks. And it was widely promoted, and then suddenly it was just silenced. So what's interesting about Operation Highjump is, once again, a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracies around this. Some say that the Nazis, they're finishing off the last of them. Some say, once again, extraterrestrials involved. The whole World War II era was interesting because everything changed. Suddenly our technology rapidly advanced. NASA was suddenly this force to be reckoned with, along with all the other space programs, the Cold War. Just things just changed rapidly, and many link this to a connection between aliens or fallen angels making a pact with our government. Others say, you know, there's a lot of dirty under the table stuff going on, strange bedfellows, but regardless, you can't talk about that era without Admiral Byrd. And of course, in 1953, on a TV show interview, Byrd stated that Antarctica is the new resource, a landmass greater than the USA, rich in mountains of coal, uranium, nickel, and more. Many countries wanted a piece of this rich resource. Russia, Australia, Brazil, and countries recovering from World War II. So the interesting thing is, we never hear anyone talk about going to Antarctica to get in any of these resources if it's rich with resources. It's just kind of strange. And of course, in 1959, there was a international treaty that all nations agree not to go or be involved with Antarctica. Everyone quits going there. No further discussion. An international treaty sealed Antarctica off from exploration. So wait a minute. Why does Antarctica have to be sealed off? But it's full of resources. We're always told in school and on the news that we're running out of resources, fossil fuels, non-renewable resources. We need to decrease the population, get a grip on birth control and so forth, because we can't afford to have more people on the earth, which I totally disagree with. But here's Antarctica with rich resources, and we're just gonna forget about it, forsake it, because it's a no man's land. I mean, Antarctica is one of the last places on Earth that is not claimed, that is not civilized by anyone, really. The only people that can go there are people who have it clear from the government personnel. I remember when I was a child in elementary school, I was obsessed with penguins, my favorite animal still to this day, but I used to think I wanted to be a zoologist that would go to Antarctica one day and study penguins. Then I found out the awful fact that to be a zoologist that studies penguins, I have to first specialize in all birds, and I just can't take that. But anyways, scientists still have their limits in going to Antarctica to observe these birds, and very select few can go, and there's a lot of limitations. But interesting thing about those who believe in this hollow earth is that the earth is a flat disk, and the firmament that the Bible describes basically is what Antarctica is, and rather than it just being in the south, it surrounds the entire globe. And so basically, some say that Admiral Byrd found this out. He found the firmament, he found the edge, and they didn't want anyone else knowing about this. And they also wanted to hide this because of the fact that it was rich with resources, and there's a lot of greed and money to be made in this. And then, of course, not long after, there was suddenly the space race with the moon landings and the space lab, and so forth. And some say that in 1956, that most likely Admiral Byrd found the firmament, and it proves the existence of God, the Creator, that there's a higher power, and that they don't want us to know about the flat Earth theory because it would just destroy Darwinism and everything else. So, aside from Admiral Byrd, who is linked to a lot of the flat Earth theories, the first expedition into Antarctica was done by Ernest Shackleton, and it was called the Nimrod Expedition, and it was the first of 3. And it was a British Antarctic expedition between 1907 and 1908. But I find the name Nimrod Expedition very uncanny because Nimrod is linked to the Antichrist, and he is linked to the first One World Order. Actually, not the very first, but the second of 3, because the first is the pre-flood world. He reset up all of the pre-flood pagan religions, post-flood days, and a lot of the Apollo, Osiris, and many of the constellations that NASA is named after are named after Nimrod and his consort Semiramis, Isis, and the planets as well are named after Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. So it's just interesting how NASA is. And also, if you look at their logo, you'll notice that it has the V. And I talked about this in the V symbolism video, representing the 5th age or the Aquarian age. It has that kind of thing going on. But it also looks like a snake tongue. But it also can represent the dome and the sphere as well. And another thing that's interesting is that there was a photograph. It was the ESSA 7 photograph of the North Pole. Some say that it looks almost as if the Earth is flat, with the sheet of ice that represents the North Pole in the center, while others think it's proof of hollow Earth. And I guess one other thing I want to say, like I said earlier with my profile picture, like if it was, or if Earth was flat and we were just looking at graphics, then I guess even with the planetary connection video I did like over a year ago, a lot of the things I said I guess would then fall out of line because then we wouldn't really have been going to planets. But it's interesting. I do think the planets, the stars, everything we see has a purpose to play. But if the Earth is flat, it would have to shift a lot of the things that I'm looking into. If you take a look at the 1995 Illuminati card game, they have a couple of interesting cards that go hand in hand. One says flat earthers, and it's mocking the ideal of there being a flat earth. And then there's another one that says NASA that shows the moon landings being a stage production. And the earth in the background looks like a disc. So it's interesting that there's these two Illuminati cards, and they're notorious for being representative of real conspiracies or things that are just totally wrong with this world. Another interesting thing to take a look at with how much we can believe of if our Earth is round is some will point to the fact that the USGS has been caught falsely depicting maps. So, for example, America, Africa, and Australia are bigger on the flat Earth map than they actually are in the usual standard map. Even in articles that have been published by credible sources, they point to the fact that North America is depicted larger than Africa, Alaska is larger than Mexico, and China is smaller than Greenland. But in reality, China is 4 times bigger than Greenland, Africa is 3 times larger than North America, and Mexico is larger than Alaska. And I'll have to put the pictures up there so you can look at the maps we generally see and how it really looks. And it looks kind of funny, actually. Another thing is, a reason that people will say that there's a flat Earth is they'll say the curvature of the Earth and seeing things from afar and how they should disappear because the Earth is curving. So, for instance, there was a video on YouTube, you can look it up. Someone was saying how they could see the Chicago skyline from Michigan, the shoreline of it, and that's 60 miles away, and they're saying if the Earth curved, that the skyline should disappear slowly, or gradually, but it doesn't. And then, of course, another one is the flight times and paths. Now, some people use this as leverage to say, no, that means the Earth is round because there's some things that don't add up. What was interesting in a video I saw that was pretty compelling on Hollow Earth is that in the southern hemisphere, all flights, once they leave their destination and fly over the ocean, the GPS is turned off and then it's turned back on, which is a little bit suspicious if you ask me. And some say the reason they're doing this is to hide something that they're going past. And then some will say, too, with the Earth spinning constantly at a rapid pace, that it would actually affect how fast flights got there, and it would actually increase the amount of flight time, and even maybe divert the plane's direction, but it doesn't. Pilots are always able to make it to one destination to the other on the same amount of time. And then some common questions those that are skeptical of flat Earth will ask, that they'll stack up against it, is if the Earth was flat, we could travel to the place where the Earth and sky met, but we can't. That's one thing they'll say. And I believe this kind of could be, like, you could look at it from the dome aspect, like we're in a dome. They'll say that if the Earth was flat, we could reach the place, reach out and touch the sun, but we can't. They also look at the ideal that if the Earth was flat, we could fall off the horizon, but we don't. And once again, I think this can be answered by what flat earthers propose as there being the ring of ice around the Earth. If the Earth was flat, it would simply fall, but it doesn't. Another one is if the Earth was flat, a lunar eclipse would cast an oval shadow on the moon's surface, but it doesn't. Another one is if the Earth was flat, the lengths of all shadows would be identical when measured simultaneously because all rays of sunlight that strike the Earth are parallel, but they vary. And then another one is, but if the Earth is not flat, why does it look flat? So those are interesting questions to propose. And then one thing I forgot when I was looking at the history that I think is important that you guys should look into is the Globus Cruciger. You've probably seen it in paintings before with different nobility and stuff in Europe, but it is an orb topped with a cross. It's considered a Christian symbol of authority used throughout the Middle Ages on coins, iconography, and of course, it's associated with royalty along with the scepter. Pagans used the globe as a symbol of authority. Holding it in one's hand or having it under the foot was a clear visual message of established power supremacy over the world. The Romans appear to have been quite familiar with this symbol as suggested by the 2nd century coin belonging to Emperor Hadrian's reign that carried the Roman god Salus, shown with a foot placed on a globus or 4th century coin from Emperor Constantine's reign that depicted him with a globus in hand. So, for those who think that people thought the Earth was flat before, Columbus, there were plenty of people who clearly depicted it round with the globus cruciger. But the interesting thing about it is that it bears a lot of similarities with the Egyptian ankh, which is an object or design resembling a cross but having a loop instead of the top arm, used in ancient Egypt as a symbol of life. So, are we made to believe that the Earth is globular because in some way it's linked to the ankh and it's linked to this globus cruciger, which is actually a symbol of life by pagans? Or is it just a coincidence? I don't know. I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to take a look at. Another theory that some have in terms of the Earth being flat is they'll use a Coriolis effect, and they'll say, like when you say flush a toilet or you have a sink, the direction the water spins, they'll say in the northern hemisphere the drain spinning in one direction, while in the southern hemisphere causing them to spin in the opposite direction. So water spins in these areas the opposite direction where it's coming from. So some will say that doesn't mean anything, and that actually it proves furthermore the existence of a spinning ball Earth. But getting to some scriptures that flat earthers are going to point to. 1 Chronicles 16:30, part of it says, He has fixed the earth firm, immovable. Psalms 93:1, Thou hast fixed the earth immovable and firm, and it goes on. Psalms 96:10, He has fixed the earth firm, immovable, and it goes on again. Psalms 104:5, Thou didst fix the earth on its foundation so that it never can be shaken. Isaiah 45:18, part of it says, Who made the earth and fashioned it, and himself fixed it fast. And then some boil down the creation story in Genesis 1:2 that says, On the second day a vault, the firmament, was created to divide the waters, some being above and some being below the vault. And they'll say that on the 4th day, when the sun, moon, and stars were created, they were placed. So once again, it goes back to the whole placed rather than, they'll say that's in the firmament. And then in Daniel 4:10-11, they'll say, When the king saw the tree of great height at the center of the earth, reaching its top to the sky and visible to the earth's farthest bounds, people will say, if it was visible to the earth's farthest bounds, you could see it, that means that this great tree proves that there's a flat earth. And then they'll look at Matthew 4:8 that states, Once again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. And they'll say, obviously this would mean the earth is flat if he can see everything from afar. And they'll look at Jeremiah 51:16 that says, He brings up the mist from the ends of the earth, He opens the rifts for the rain and brings the wind out of His storehouse. And also they'll point to the book of Enoch 33:1-2 that says, I went to the extreme ends of the earth and saw there huge beasts, each different from the other, and different birds also, differing from one another in appearance, beauty, and voice. And to the east of those beasts I saw the ultimate ends of the earth, which rest on the heaven. And the gates of heaven were open, and I saw how the stars of heaven come out. So, once again, you see this whole sky dome, this vault, this firmament. And for those who are skeptical of a flat earth and say that the Bible does not point to that, but it indeed points to a spherical earth, they will look at Isaiah 40:22, where it says, It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. And so some will say, wait a minute, it says circle, but it does not say sphere. And flat earth maps show the earth as a circle, it just has the ice firmament, it's not spherical. The next one they'll say is Job 22:14 that says, Thick clouds are a covering to him, that he seeth not, and he walketh in the circuit of heaven. And once again, Proverbs 8:27, When he prepared the heavens, I was there, when he set a compass upon the face of the depth. So, all of these things here, all these scriptures here is what some would say proves that the earth is not flat, but spherical. But I mean, it's up to you to decide. Like I said, I'm on the fence here. But one of the last things I want to talk about is the Tower of Babel and how that would play into flat Earth. So I've heard many propose that the Tower of Babel is not an actual tower, but it's a Stargate or portal. That would make sense. And what's interesting is it says that it was possible for them to make this and to actually get to heaven. So for those who say flat Earth we can't leave, it kind of like at the Tower of Babel you could leave because clearly there's a second and third heaven. But it also raises the question, if we're not allowed to leave and the rocket ships were able to get through, but God wouldn't allow the Tower of Babel and he confounded the languages, then maybe that we didn't actually go to space. Maybe these landings and things are a hoax. Or maybe it is a Stargate. Maybe the only way to leave this atmosphere is to go through a portal or a Stargate. But other than that, you can't. I mean, people have had dreams of going to outer space. I've had dreams of levitating almost into space, but I didn't. But I've heard of people who've had these dreams. Can people astral project to space? I don't know. I mean, like I said, don't try to astral project. But the point is, it is an interesting concept. If we're not able to leave, then it kind of sounds a little like, I think back to how like we're always constantly inundated with all these science fiction films and books and movies and Star Trek and Star Wars and so forth and this and that. And to find out that what we're saying about space is mere guesses. Like a lot of the astronauts said they couldn't see the stars when they were up in space. I don't know. It's very interesting indeed. One of the last things too I want to share is that if you look at the UN logo, it basically is identical to the flat Earth map. So do they know something that we don't? And then I guess another question for those who believe in climate change or global cooling. I mean, how would flat Earth play into that? But, like I said, I'd like to see you guys' comments and responses. What do you believe? Do we live on a flat Earth or do we live on a spherical Earth? Why? I guess is the question. Like I said, I'm on the fence, but it's always good to explore these topics. And I hope that for anyone who didn't know about it or just wanted to know more, this was helpful to you. And I'll talk to you guys next week. I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care, and Yahweh bless.